Hello, Joe.
Happy creepy.
And lads.
Arthur O'D, hello to you.
Hey, Joe.
And Will O'Callaghan, welcome along. Well, welcome back. You were in legal course all day?
I was, and I was glued to my phone during the entire time. I'm sure the people who gave the course won't be entirely happy. They looked down and I was on my phone, but I was like, wait, what? The PGA Tour and Live Golf are now coming together. And I was like, I better keep an eye on this.
This is where you do a course so that when you're on air you can say, no, we can't say that.
I'd be a very bad student if 4 hours after the course I wasn't taking all of the advice on like a sponge.
I always thought those things were very interesting because, like, sport is an interesting area.
It's a grey area, it seems, because of the idea of commentary and fair comment that you can make that maybe in news you wouldn't do.
Yeah, fair comment is one of the great defences in defamation. But, like, again, and we touched on it last week with Dave Fitzgerald, if you go on air and say, that manager's completely incompetent, he's a joke, and I think he should get the sack.
Which we didn't say about David Fitzgerald for anybody listening.
Before I paraphrase
for anybody only thinking this is...
That Joe Malloy said
we didn't say that.
Disgrace.
Yeah. If anything, we expressed our queasiness at that kind of commentary.
Yes, exactly.
But sport is in that weird sphere where, you know, I to be fair, you could say that about public figures. You could say that about a politician. Though maybe if you're getting into the realm of CEOs of private companies, you'd have to really back up the incompetence line.
Yeah.
You couldn't just go on and say, Will O'Callaghan's incompetent, he should get the bullet.
I'm sure you could give many reasons for that, Joe, but yeah, you couldn't just say it without justification or being able to say, here is my proof for this assertion that I'm about to make.
But it's commonplace in sports commentary.
Yeah.
And no one takes action, no one sues. There's never been a GAA manager who's sued because...
It'd be a bizarre case if someone turned around at some point and said, you know, Sam Allardyce did a horrific job with Leeds over the last few weeks and Big Sam is going to the High Court to claim that you were unfair to say he did a bad job.
Terrible manager. Yeah. So there you go.
But I suppose, Joe, you would argue in that case that the results were poor and that there was no kick from Leeds, and you'd make that argument in a way that you probably can't do in what we would call, air quotes, hard news.
That's true. It'd be fair comment, I think. So we just spoke to Lawrence Donegan there about the Live Golf PGA Tour merger. One of just
not a merger
spectacles in sport. So Lawrence reckons that next year there will be no Live Tour.
Yeah,
that the Saudis have just
bombshell.
decided it's a pain in the backside to actually run a golf tour. We'll just basically buy a big old stake in the PGA Tour and sponsor it and be involved in golf that way, and that's the way it's going to be.
Sort of feels like they could have done that first.
Yeah, I think they did approach the PGA Tour and were told, no, we're not doing business with you. But now things have changed and the PGA Tour is running out of cash by the week trying to compete with the arms race that Liv has provided. So I think both sides are happy enough to put down their swords.
Do we know much about, this is an open-ended question that I presume we don't know the answer to, it's more rhetorical, like, do we know what return on investment the Saudi investment fund is getting? Because it does, like, we call sports washing all the time. It's like, what good is it to them to own like a significant stake in the PGA Tour now? I just wondering what, like, it is seen as, at least nominally, investment. And I just wonder what they're like, you know, surely just like, you know, giving Phil Mickelson all the money in the world doesn't seem like you will ever get a return on that investment, no matter what you do, outside of, you know, be it sports washing or be it, as you call it, not sports washing, but power flex. Yeah, exactly. You know,
that's fair
but
point.
the same thing now in the, you know, Messi and Ronaldo and Kante, as Richie mentioned earlier, which I hadn't even heard, and what they're trying to do with football. Like, when is that ever going to repay itself? I don't understand where the value is going to be for them.
It's not, I think, is the short version.
Yeah.
I don't think Live Golf was ever going to be a viable model, but if the argument is that you want to have control over the game of golf, you've come and take the whole house when you've got the three major golf tours all under the one umbrella, with you as the main investor behind it all. Like, in many ways you're an agitator at the start, but now you come in and take everything away at the end. I wonder, would this have been possible if the schism in golf hadn't happened, though? Would the PGA Tour have taken this investment from the private investment fund if golf hadn't shattered a couple of years ago?
I don't think so, because I think
then no matter how much money you spent on Live, the bigger objective was obtained.
Yeah, I don't know if they were always working towards this situation or not.
This beats having your own tour, though. You now own the PGA Tour effectively.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a sense yet as to whether or not they own it or not, but certainly they're the chief investor in this new company. The PGA Tour will have a majority on the board. But again, I don't know
the chairman,
the reality of how that board will work. I mean, I'm just fascinated to see Rory McIlroy's comments in particular. I mean, he's basically spent 18 months banging the pulpit to say this should not happen, this is wrong.
It'd be funny if he called it a day, wouldn't it? That's me.
Is there any chance he softens his position and says it's better to have everyone back together than what was happening?
I think
he'll have to come up with something, won't he? But it's how he actually feels about it, I think, is the more intriguing thing. Because, it's funny, because where do you stand on a human level here? Because in one way, he did the right thing, but he was beaten by a power greater, and the big bad wolf won in the end, and it's like, that's going to be portrayed as humiliating for him. And Phil Mickelson, you mentioned his kind of arrogant tweets that he was sending, about McIlroy. That's only going to go tenfold now.
Yeah. So
he'll be portrayed as the loser. But I don't know. I feel like he's kept his dignity all along, and I think history will be favourable to him, I would imagine.
You would think so. Jay Monahan, the PGA Tour commissioner, last year he was, I would say, leveraging 9/11, I think it's fair to say, when he was doing interviews and he was speaking about the LIV Tour, and he said, I have two families that are close to me that lost loved ones. My heart goes out to them, and I would ask any player who has left for LIV or that would ever consider leaving, have you ever had to apologise for being a member of the PGA Tour? And now fast forward a year. So I don't think when he was saying those things he thought he'd be in this position, certainly not this quickly. It's like an unbelievably humiliating climb down.
Yeah. Although, Lawrence is portraying him almost as some way as the winner, here, and it is funny how, look at Trump and look at everything that's happened since Trump, and it's far from just that. There's no consequences for words or for statements or promises or anything like that. There's no such thing as humiliation if you refuse to be humiliated. And he will make that comment. It'll be as if it never happened now. It's irrelevant, because he'll take his 15 million a year and he'll claim this is a great victory, and he did it all for the best of golf, and golf will come together as one and take over the world, along with the Saudis.
Yeah. I do now wonder if the reason McIlroy at the PGA a couple of weeks ago refused to take questions on LIV was very much because
he knew this was in the
heads
works.
up. Because Jimmy Dunn is named as one of the people who brokered the deal on the PGA Tour board. Weirdly, again, he's an interesting case. There's a piece Paul Kimmage did with him last year, because Paul Kimmage noted that Jimmy Dunn and Rory McIlroy were very tight. They were playing in pro-ams together, and Dunn has an amazing story. His business partner, friend, was killed in 9/11, and Dunn resolved to build up the business and paid for the education of children who had lost parents. In 9/11, the company he worked for at the time was one of the World Trade Center buildings, and so he's paid for the education of any family who lost parent. And here he is negotiating this deal. It's all very confusing. There are climb downs all over the place of sorts, but if him and McIlroy are very close, you've got to think somewhere someone, be it Jay Monahan or Jimmy Dunn or someone, said, Rory, just for your own sake, I just would cool the jets on the whole we must crush LIV talk, because
the 9/11 thing though was very much brought on by Monahan. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if too many people even
made the connection.
Saudi Arabia is wasn't even involved in 9/11.
No, it's true. I wouldn't think Saudi. I wouldn't hear 9/11 and think Saudi.
No, exactly. Well, they weren't involved. There was a Saudi at a Saudi person at the the organizer or whatever you want to call it of it.
Is this because the Bush regime convinced everyone so well that it was Iraq that were involved as opposed to the Saudi Arabians who were on the planes?
No, but it wasn't Saudi Arabia. It was
funded by a Saudi Arabian in Bin Laden.
Anyway, look, we won't get into that. Sorry, my point was though that it does not. Jimmy Dunn's not necessarily making that connection in the way that Monahan was. Sorry, so without getting into the ins and outs of exactly what happened in 9/11, I think that's an important note. Is that as you said, you wouldn't necessarily automatically associate Saudi Arabia with 9/11.
Aside from McIlroy getting maybe a bit of a heads up, do we reckon some of the players found out when they picked up their phone morning time in the USA?
They're all tweeting about it.
What the hell is this?
They're all livid, Morikawa. This is a major winner in the last 18 months. I love finding out morning news on Twitter. Wesley Bryan, who's a more rank and file PGA Tour member, I love finding out this info on Twitter. This is amazing. You all should be ashamed. I have a lot of questions. You have a lot of questions to answer. I feel betrayed. Won't be able to trust anyone within the corporate structure of the PGA Tour for a very long time. Mackenzie Hughes, people, if you follow golf, you know Mackenzie Hughes. Nothing like finding out through Twitter that we're merging with a tour that we said we would never do that with. So they got an email this morning to tell them that this seismic thing was happening, is the gist.
Probably around the same time we all got the email from the three tours to announce it as well.
Well, apparently Greg Norman got a phone call a minute before
It's a lot of good, isn't it?
So that would suggest he wasn't at the centre of this situation.
I thought Greg was Liv's main man. He should have been.
I think they ousted him there last year when it all went a little bit haywire.
Even they realised there's a
Not the greatest PR.
bit of a stink about this guy. Even if we're not trying to sports wash, this isn't helping.
Greg, we don't need you to throw cans to fans anymore.
Yeah. So to wrap it up, Lawrence Donegan's sense, and you can listen to that full piece as well, I'm sure it's alongside this video or alongside this podcast, is that next year the Live Tour will just be wrapped up. Nobody was watching it anyway, and that we'll be watching the, I don't know, Aramco PIF PGA Tour with Phil Mickelson and all the boys coming back with their signing on fees up to $200 million each.
Yeah.
And saying hi to Will Zalatoris, who turned down $100 million, and saying, well, look, we're all at the same. We're all in the same place anyway.
But I'm intrigued as to where golf goes from here, right? So take Saudi and Live and everything out of it, right? You can't put toothpaste back in a tube. Like, this is the expected money now. So they have whatever way these contracts will transfer or whatever. Like, the next time it's coming up, Rory McIlroy or, you know, John Rahm is going to be like, here, do you know, I mean, this is the kind of prize money we expect now. Why am I, you know, competing against these guys who are earning much more than me, and I'm on, you know, I'm as big a draw to the what is now the PGA Tour or whatever it's going to be called as anybody else. I think that we're going to a place where we're going to be in absolutely untenable, unsustainable prize money. Maybe it will be back to rather than guaranteed money or whatever, and golf could end up eating itself. You know, there just might not be enough money for what the top players are going to expect, because this lunacy of the last 12 months is just going to come back to bite them, you know?
Yeah, again, I don't know how it all works. Do the PIF say we'll cover prize money? I don't know.
Like, you have to assume
they're
that
still there,
that Brooks Koepka and, you know, those who got the really big first contracts, the early adopters, I would call them, of the tour, would presumably still keep their contract at that level for as long as they're signed.
The contract.
Yeah, this isn't going to be.
They were once-off payments up front. Here's $100
They've
million.
already got it.
Yeah,
still in his account. Thanks a lot.
Oh yeah, it's in it's in my account. You're not getting it back. So the players who turn down big money, like, not that he needs money. Tiger Woods turned down $750 million.
He might regret that slightly now.
I would think so. You know, like I said, Will Zalatoris, who's having back surgery at the moment and may not play golf again, turned down $100 million. So yeah, Phil walks back in with $200 million.
I don't agree. I don't think that, though. I don't think they'll regret it. I don't think if you wanted to do it, you weren't doing it because you thought you were going to get $100 million elsewhere. There was the understanding they weren't taking the money for a reason, and I appreciate, because they've been sold out doesn't mean they've sold out, if you know what I mean.
I don't get the sense most of those golfers turned down the money because they had ethical issues with Saudi Arabia. They turned down the money because they thought the Live Tour was a joke. There were no ranking points.
They'd be left out in the cold.
They might not be in majors. And the PGA Tour was like still the best tour. Like very, very, very few of them ever mentioned, oh, ethically I felt I didn't like where the money was coming from. McIlroy said that once, but only once. The rest of them never said that. Often if you heard them talk, they would say things like, golf should be 72 holes. Like, weirdly, they seem to have more of an issue with 54 holes than like journalists being murdered by this regime.
Maybe they are angry then. So they are somewhat bitter.
Oh, I'd say they're peeved.
Oh, because the reason they did was they were hedging their bets that these guys might not make it out there in the big bad world. And not only did they make it, but they're back with them with the $100 million in their pocket.
Yeah, I couldn't emphasise that enough. Listening to the golfers week in, week out, the sports washing ethical aspect, that was like a thing for a week or two.
Yeah, poor GMAC was poor GMAC, it's his own fault, but he was front and centre, and nobody else ever had to answer a question about it.
Justin Johnson was beside him in the press conference going,
you keep talking, GMAC.
Politics, no thank you.
Will there be changes to the tour now? I know we're like totally in speculation.
I'd say so. Yeah, I'd say there'll be more of an off season, and there'll be more like marquee events, and then more kind of dud events, maybe fewer events across the year, but I don't know.
Someone was actually, I think someone texted that in to us during Lawrence. Presumably when those players left the PGA Tour, other players come in and fill their space.
Yeah.
So now do those guys just kind of get bumped back down? Presumably there's going to be an awful lot of pro golfers kind of...
No, they might just pick and choose the 5 or 6 big names from Live. We'll take Brooks, Bryson, Patrick Reed, Phil, Cam Smith, the rest of you. You get to play on the DP World Tour.
Chat you later.
It's over in Europe and also all around the world.
There's like 5 events a year in Europe,
Will we push on?
We shall.
Go on. So that's very much the news of the day. Championship GAA style of play. Loads of emails on this. People aren't impressed with the football that they're watching, is the gist. For instance, good evening, fellas. I had the debate with a friend over a pint about the current GAA football season. We couldn't put a finger on the reason it has failed to capture our attention for a sustained amount of time. The skill levels undoubtedly are on the rise, and the standards of fitness and commitment by inter-county players has probably never been higher. It would seem contradictory that this would lead to less excitement around the championship. Format aside, and there are issues with the format, I think we can agree, I feel there is no room for individualism in football anymore, and outside of Clifford, in brackets generational talent, there are no superstars in the sport. Guys like Kane, Shane Walsh, Damien Comer, I feel would have bigger profiles in the sport 10 or 20 years ago. I feel every year there's less and less room, there is less and less reason to tune into GAA football games. Let me know your thoughts.
I stuck up a tweet about this on Sunday. I was watching the Sunday game, and you couldn't help but be struck by the reasonably empty stadiums that were there across the weekend.
Are you taking June bank holiday as a big part of the reason?
You take it into account somewhat, yeah, but I mean, this was consistent enough with the first round didn't exactly ignite, and people were saying that people were kind of waiting for round 2 and round 3 despite the newness of all this. And 3 main reasons came back from people who responded to the tweet that I stuck up. I would say the overwhelming reason was people are not enjoying the style of football that's being played at the moment. The second was that 25 quid is quite steep when you know that you'd have to go into your team 3 times, once at a neutral venue, once away, and maybe you might go to the home game. And then people were also taking into account the format means that there's no sense of jeopardy whatsoever. I know John Fogarty's writing about this in the Irish Examiner today, that there's a very good chance the team will go through without a win to the knockout stages of the All-Ireland
Championship. There or Sligo, most likely, yeah. I mean, well, there's 2 aspects. The format, it doesn't work for me. I really don't like it. So, like, the headline news is 15 of the 16 teams are still alive, and I guess
that's because 12 go through.
In theory, they are, but I mean, for Louth to still be alive, they need to be carried a neutral venue in Group 1. In Group 2, Westmeath technically still alive. They have to beat Tyrone. Kildare, Sligo most likely will both lose their next match, so one of them will go through
difference will probably
with 1 point from 3 games, so a draw and then 2 defeats. And in Group 4, Clare are out. There's no competition really for like top 2, so Derry and Monaghan on 3 points, Donegal on 2 points. If that had been just 2 teams progressed, then we'd have Donegal versus Monaghan this weekend in what would be like a knockout game. And I understand the argument that letting so many through ensures that the quarterfinal lineup will be stacked, but I just feel with football, been living in this state of delayed gratification all year. Like, I just want something now. It's June.
Yeah,
I want a bit of fun. I want a shock. I want a knockout game. I want everything on the line. I'm eating all my vegetables first. I'm still not at the good part. Like, I don't know. It's a tweak. It's not like revolution. I just think it's very obvious they have to try 2 teams only qualify next year. That just has to be tried. We're seeing it in crowds. We're seeing it in the intensity of the games. We're seeing it in the conversations we're having week to week. Kerry going to Páirc Uí Chaoimh is not this life or death kind of fixture. It should be. This is the least punitive group stages in world sport.
Joe, 3 group games are more than enough for anyone to not complain about not getting enough championship games in one summer. And that's not including playing the provincials on top of that too. So I think if you have 3 games and you have to be in the top 2, that's enough to justify that you got a fair crack.
Yeah, you might lose one big team, but like that, good.
Yeah.
You need a bit of juice now, surely. Like, there's no oxygen in this championship.
Absolutely not. And myself and Will were having this argument with Ger on Friday, and Ger was saying, that it'll be all worth it in the end, basically. We'll have these good matches, but I think we need something along the way. We can't be just waiting for a tournament to start. We can't be having this prolonged pre-season, basically. And another thing, someone wrote this in the paper today, I think it might have been Dennis Walsh, sorry if I've got it wrong, but about the lack of relegation being an issue as well. We talk about you can have what's the word I'm looking for? Danger, jeopardy. You can have jeopardy both ways, and look at the Leinster Hurling Championship was terrible this year, but it probably had the best last day of anything because you had those 2 matches where everything was on the line for Wexford and for Westmeath and Antrim. That's it. All the original sin was the cop out. Yeah. The original sin was that they didn't go for Proposal B. They wanted to keep the provincial championships relevant. They wanted to give everybody a chance to get in, and not everybody needs to have the chance. And
they've been so burned by the Super 8s, and like Dublin, John Fogarty made the point in 18 and 19, they won their first 2 matches, they were pretty much through, so they played second string sides against Roscommon and Tyrone, and they've been so burned by that they've corrected.
So what you have now is a championship that is like linked to the provincial championships and linked to the league.
Yeah.
But and where it just sort of happens, and then like we've 5 weeks, 3 rounds played over 4 weekends, over 5 weekends in real time in the middle of the summer, where it's all kind of a bit pointless. And Clare and like either Kildare or Sligo, Louth and Westmeath, who everybody knows none of those teams can win the All-Ireland, will get knocked out, and then we start for real. Like it's pre-season.
I know the provincial championships are a necessary evil. It'll take time to get rid of them. They're winding down as we speak, but like for us to sacrifice the group stages on top of that, it's too much real estate of what is a tight season. Like too much of the season now is delayed gratification.
It perpetuates the system as well, Joe, where if you finish in the top 8 in the country with your league finish, you're almost certainly into at least a preliminary quarter-final in the championship, because you can fail in the provincials but still be well seeded for the championship.
And I don't think like the toll of you have to play in a preliminary quarter-final, like I just don't think the majority of us watching round 3 will be that bothered either way. Like, will fans be like swinging from the rafters because like, oh yes, we've avoided a preliminary quarter-final? Like, it's not enough of a win. You're making, I would say, like a disapproving face at me for the last 5
No, it's not. Well, I do think lastly teams will they'd rather finish top than second or third. It just means you have a less week to have to play. Like, like Kerry are probably in a situation where they're playing non-stop now.
Yeah.
Through if they get, depending on how far they get.
Is that compelling enough for you to be tuning into?
Well, it's not that my kind of point with this is, and it always kind of comes back to the same thing, is that there's the reality here, and there's an ideal that isn't reflective of any reality. I don't think there's ever been a time when people are captivated by every element of the football championship.
I'm not captivated by any element of it right now.
But you will be from the quarterfinals on, and there'll be 3 weekends.
Life
and
is for living.
No, but there'll be 3 weekends and there'll be blockbuster. That much we can guarantee. Like as much as we possibly can know anything. We'll know
quarterfinals are hit and miss, and I don't know if there's that many better teams going to be in it than we're coming through the qualifiers.
But then if you knock it down to 2 teams instead of 3, that'll make no difference. It's inevitably what we're getting. We're getting to the same thing, just with an extra round of games. So if you knock off, so it makes no difference then.
There's only 10 good teams or whatever.
So there isn't, like, the fact of the matter is there just aren't that many good teams in the football championship, or certainly there aren't enough teams of a similar level.
Yeah.
So
need a Super League.
I don't think it's going to make any blind bit of difference.
Okay, that's a good
and
point.
I just don't think there's anything. It's never been the case where it's going to all go and it's been brilliant, and it's like every game is class, and every game, most games, like for most of the football championship, most games have been absolutely pointless.
Yeah, definitely where I do have sympathy is like the lack of depth, for sure, one, and also like you just can't bank on certain teams to show up. Like Donegal this year, woeful. A couple of years ago, like a really juicy prospect in a quarter-final, for instance. So like the to-ing and froing of teams is a bit of an issue as well when you're trying to map out a format which will serve, because the depth comes and goes a touch.
The only thing though, Arthur, is championship is built on, and I am in no way saying let's go back to all knockout and there's no way that, but it is what the championship was built on was knockout football and hurling, right? And that was and any change from that, I think what you can't have is games that mean nothing, because that's not what the sport is built on. No. And maybe we'll adapt in time, and maybe we're being short-sighted and this will all develop into something and it'll find its way and it'll be all great in 5 years, right? Maybe. But I just think that, like, I remember being absolutely sickened when they had the Super 8s and Roscommon played Cork in like the last round and both of them were already out, and I was there thinking, I was like, this must be the first game in GAA championship history in either sport that means nothing, that there's no winner or loser to, and we can't keep having that.
No, I agree.
And what we've done is a system that's created even more of that, because everybody's true. So maybe we won't always have the great games, but surely we should have a thing where if you lose, you're in serious trouble. Maybe you don't need to be out, but Kerry losing to Mayo should have meant that Cork was basically knockout for them. And if they lost on Saturday, it still would have been fine.
Yeah.
Look, there's all sorts of in-between bits you could sort out with that why thing, but like, why then should they have a match against such a high opposition at that point of the championship, whereas in the case of, say, Dublin are playing Roscommon, Kildare and Sligo? Why, you know what I mean? Like, so there are peculiarities that I appreciate, but back to your point, you can't predict where different teams will be in a different cycle.
And like, don't all sports from World Cup football down,
Draws.
don't they thrive on the group of death? The one that, like, it's not necessarily fair, but it's not like it's Kerry getting screwed every year. It's just, this was the nature of the draw, and look at this little group that we've cooked up, and everyone gets very excited about it for that year. It's not like Kerry and Mayo would be condemned every year to be in that group of death.
No,
but like, it's an aspect of a given year which adds a certain something to it, you know.
I'm all for any system that stops the same usual teams winning, but I don't think this will do that anyway. Like, I still think we're going to be in the same place come the end of the year, which is kind of disheartening in its own way. Probably, maybe they drop off, but this system won't be the reason for that, why there'll be any change in it. It does just seem to give Kerry, Dublin et al. More time to
get their act
correct
together.
anything wrong, and that's grim. That's really grim.
At the same time, we're in a football championship that we should be excited about. It's the first time that I can remember that we would honestly say, would anyone in this room be shocked if Dublin, Kerry, Mayo, Galway, Derry, and you might even throw Tyrone in there, won the All-Ireland?
Do you know what's really weird?
You wouldn't be shocked. Any of them could win it.
Do you know what's weird about that then? It's like a great team is not going to win the All-Ireland this year.
Yeah.
I'm not as kind of
invested in it because of it.
Touch. Whoever wins the All-Ireland of those now, I'll sort of be sitting there saying, yeah, they're a real downgrade on what we've seen for the last decade.
It beats us, Joe, having probably the greatest team of all time with Dublin winning year after year after year. I prefer
every competition has to be its own thing.
But to be fair, Dublin winning year after year after year doesn't tell the truth of Dublin being pushed to the pin of their collars and replays and winning by a point. Like, they were epics. Then I felt this great sense of, and I would have been like I would have had a leaning towards Mayo for family reasons. But even after those games, I would have had this great sense of, wow, but like what champions we have and what an epic way to win it. Whereas I think now, whoever wins it, I'll be sitting there saying, flawed.
I don't know when it gets to it.
You can't have the Dublin.
I did Kerry Galway last year
through Leinster.
Amazing.
The same Dublin teams that didn't have a competitive game till the All-Ireland semi-final.
Yeah.
Like, that's not.
But they were a great team winning the All-Ireland as opposed to a flawed team winning the All-Ireland.
But what if Mayo went on to win, say they beat Cork next weekend and progress on, win a quarter-final, semi-final, final.
Yeah.
Like, what else could you possibly ask them to do?
Oh, nothing. It's not against them, but I would just have this sense of it's not as valuable in All-Ireland as if you'd beaten Dublin.
Because you've played more games.
Dublin from 3 years ago.
That's nonsense. That's nonsense.
You can't be saying
how I feel.
You're just winding us up.
I'm not winding you up. Beating Dublin 4 years ago is a more valuable Ireland than the 2023.
Sure, they didn't beat them 4 years ago, so they can only beat them now.
I know, yeah. So like, there's a degree of you've swooped in.
What if Dublin win it? If Dublin kind of come back from being written off and go and win their favourites.
Might depend on the nature of their performance.
Were Kerry not very good champions last year? Beat Dublin in epic by a point, won a very entertaining All-Ireland final.
Yeah, I lived with that, yeah. And like
David Clifford crowned.
And Clifford.
Yeah.
Clifford sort of brought them to a certain aura of greatness.
He could do that again. He could do it on his own this year, I'll tell you, from what I saw on Saturday. But anyway, that's another story for another day. We haven't addressed one point that the actual emailer said, which was about the style of football and players not being allowed to express themselves.
We'll have to take a break.
Okay.
We've gone off on a tangent there. We went more into format. We'll take a short break. We'll come back to that email and actually answer it in just 1 sec. About individualism in the GAA being sucked out of it, squeezed out of it by the prevalence of coaching and teams being very organised, and the likes of Shane Walsh and Kane and various others would be much bigger stars and more free to express themselves if they played 20, 30 years ago, Clifford being almost the exception that proves the rule. Do we have a general agreement on that or disagreement? You're shaking your head, Arthur.
Arthur's a naysayer.
What stars from 20 years ago?
What stars from 20 years ago? What do you mean?
Who were the stars 20 years ago that are different from thing now?
Maurice Fitzgerald,
Gooch,
Mickey Linden.
20 years ago? That's 30 years ago. Mickey Linden. It's 2003.
I don't know what year it is.
Gooch, I guess.
Peter Canavan.
Conor McDonald, or Kieran McDonald even.
Yeah. Kieran McDonald for sure.
Steve McDonald, Peter Canavan.
Famously,
Oric Joyce.
Media shy Kieran McDonald.
He means superstar in terms of like their imprint on a game.
But they are. Shane Walsh is superstar. He won the best All-Ireland finals months ago.
Take away that All-Ireland final, what else he done?
What do you mean, what else he done? The other All-Ireland final he won.
Shane Walsh.
Club?
Yeah.
Yeah, but like, I don't think you can, like, Shane Walsh did it, like, had a great season, but like, is he not stifled for much of his career?
Well, but that's not what he's necessarily saying.
Yeah.
Like, he's not. He's saying about them being stars, and these guys are stars. And I know, like, not necessarily. Say from, I'd be more familiar with.
No, sorry, I'll just clarify. Format aside, he said, I feel there is no room for individualism in football anymore outside of Clifford. So I think what he's talking about there is the reason Shane Walsh caught the imagination in that All-Ireland final is almost because he went a touch off script in comparison with how footballers in the main have to play. Like, Walsh just felt really good. He had been his man. He took on shots that I think,
Not having that for a second.
I think in video analysis afterwards, I think week to week coaches would really stifle that from a
the
bunch of
biggest
guys.
day of his career, and he decides to go off grid, forget everything else that's happened that got him there.
He was in the zone. He was in the zone.
I'm not having that.
But I don't think you
But
could
I'm not
plan
saying no.
for,
But it's not that Porrick Joyce was stopping him doing it. It was just that that's not best practice. Almost, you know.
That's what I mean.
Like,
I don't think you could plan for. Like, I don't think the plan could be, here, Shane, you go out and have the game of your life and we'll just work around you. I just think the game took on that tone, and the more Walsh got into it and felt it, they just sort of went with it. And it was great. But I'd say that the reason we remember that so vividly is that's probably not as much the norm as it used to be. Teams are playing more to a plan.
I don't know, Joe. I mean, teams can have a great plan. Look at how good Dublin's plan was, and that was largely why they were such a good team across that decade. And yet, Diarmuid Connolly and Conor Callan and individualists could still work within the system.
yeah, they could and they
are
could. Like, they, yes, but could they? Yeah, I suppose maybe it's like it was designated that Diarmuid Connolly was our X Factor guy. But, like, I mean, Bernard Brogan, I still, well, not, is it?
Yeah, it's not like
So-
Colin Cooper again or whoever. Like, if we want to say Maura Fitzgerald was going and just doing his own thing, it was allowed that this guy has an X factor. We'll play to that. We'll play to his strengths.
I don't think so. I think players played in the old days, and now I think they play a system, and I think that's fine to a degree. I just think it's getting more. Obviously, it's gradual. It's not something that happened one day. But I'll give you an example. Bernard Brogan, I remember sitting in the Hogan stand up near the hill on the day Dublin played Cork in the 2010 semi-final, and he was kicking points from under the stands on both sides. It was just unbelievable, and like, he won Footballer of the Year that year when Dublin lost that match, like, in the semi-final. And as Bernard's career went on, he did less and less of that, because Dublin, as we know, famously were like scoring zone freaks. You know, there was there was low percentage, high percentage, and that's the way they played it. And look, they won 6 All-Irelands in a row, and they won 8 or 9 overall. You know, so they had loads of success from it. But I think it took some of the enjoyment out of it,
I
for
sort
sure.
of tend to agree that the scoring zones has infiltrated its way into GAA, and so you see fewer spectacular points because players are less inclined to take on a spectacular.
Oh, I don't think so.
Fair
Like,
enough.
it's not like you see more spectacular points now because the skill level's way beyond what it was. Players are more able to do different things. It's like that thing you were saying earlier about David Clifford.
And the emailer does say skill sets are higher than ever.
Like, I think we're seeing things that we just would never have seen before, and it's kind of it's like, I appreciate that there is that sort of nostalgia around these sort of mesmeric figures who did all these amazing things, and we can see the singular points in our mind, or 4 or 5 points from a highlight reel of their whole career.
Yeah.
But, like, that's not reflective of a whole career. The fact of the matter is that's not the day to day. That's not how they played every single game, and it's not how they impacted every single game. I don't think there's anything that's necessarily wrong by the fact that, say, with Diarmuid Connolly, if we take him and he's within a system that you could read it in one way that it might stifle him somewhat.
Yeah.
But in the other way, it also provides him with a balance to do things
Within a system.
a system.
But
That
do you
he
not,
can
do you not think there was more freedom 20, 30 years ago?
Well, I mean, there probably was, because the level, everything has more intense now than it was. But I think
But
it's a good
didn't
thing.
probably have a less sophisticated game plan. Like there was a degree of go out and take your shot on if you feel it, whereas now there's scoring zones. So I think
No, for sure. But
it has been curbed a touch, that individual flair. I don't think that's the reason, by the way, that we're not enjoying football at the moment. I think that's a bigger issue in terms of the systems. And
there is a good point for
the
Emilio,
coaching.
which is where things do become a bit more risk adverse. When you look back at some of the classic games from 20, 25 years ago, people would play a 50-50 pass in, and we didn't groan as much if there was a mistake.
Oh, there's no respect.
now,
This is what I was going to say, actually. Regardless of your point about maybe players having more or less freedom, right? Okay, that's arguable. There's a lot less variation in the game. So I'm thinking of that ball into Mulligan that he lays off to Canavan. Canavan reads it, runs the loop, like one of the greatest goals ever scored in an All-Ireland final. Would that happen now? Because Mulligan's not guaranteed to win that ball. Now, there are balls in, I don't know, like, I can see an argument that it is there, but I feel like we see it a lot less.
do you know what's funny? This is slightly tangential, but it's amazing that like I'm sort of watching the likes of Mayo Loud, and which I found particularly hard going, and then on the highlights, Claire Monaghan was this amazingly open game, but I found myself kind of going, there's too much space here, this is daft. Like, this is naive. And you hark back to the GAA matches that we would have loved in our youth. Like, I couldn't go back to them now either, because the lack of respect for possession,
they look weird.
I would find infuriating. So it's this weird thing where I'm watching teams recycle possession endlessly.
Yeah.
And yet, if you offered to go back 20 years, I think I would find just the profligate nature of how they all played. I couldn't go back to that either. So I'm actually just caught in a weird limbo.
But surely, like, it's not, I don't know, I think I know more than I know. We were talking about that Dennis Walsh piece about hurling's golden age.
Yeah,
like,
he says we're in the golden age.
Yeah. Like, maybe everything doesn't have to be parallel in two sports all the time. But I don't think you can ever. I suspect there has never been such a widespread calibre of player as there is in Gaelic football now. 100%. There's no way that there's like that's.
The quality is as high as it's ever been.
Look, and sorry, that stands contrary to, I forget who was it, Quigley in Fermanagh earlier on, who was in
GAA Social
on GAA Social earlier this year, saying that's basically, they're saying the exact opposite of that, saying basically like there's kind of a lot of automatons and like
athletes.
Yeah, exactly. So look,
well, I feel in defence and around midfield there's just a bunch of really fit players who carry the ball and pass it with their, like, fist pass it, and don't do there's a little less flamboyance there because that's part of a system. But I think in general the skill level is definitely higher.
Yeah, I don't know about that though, because you look at someone like Thomas Sullivan in Kerry, there's no time in history of the game where he would have been a cornerback other than now, where, you know, because he's such a good player, but like at cornerback he can do a bit of everything. He's one of the best man markers in the game, but he's also brilliant at bursting forward, and then he can kick a lovely point as well from 40 yards, you know. So there is just that those players in some ways are a lot more valuable than they used to be. He'd have been a centre forward in the old days or something.
Half back lines are definitely different stratosphere now to what they were.
Yeah.
Goal scoring, hard running machines. Why is as a last thought then, whatever at the individualism point, so we're struggling to agree on that, if we're saying the players are better, more skillful and fitter, is the spectacle worse than it's been in a long time?
I think we're in an evolutionary phase personally. I think that we're at a point now where the blanket defence, you know, being a negative thing is kind of gone, and it's just like we're looking for ways through it. And I think we're just at a point where the press is going to come soon, and this sort of like flutering around for 6 minutes like last week, or various times to a lot less kind of extreme degree we saw this weekend, where it was just, that's the setup.
Yeah.
There's a hold on and hands up and here we go, we're on the setup, and it's flutering around the place like with slow passes and jogging, and there's nothing happening.
The jogging 10 metres in possession of a ball as you're jogging towards someone that you're going to fist pass it to.
Yeah. But I just feel it will evolve. I feel like teams will just be less accepting of it, especially when they're losing, and will go and get the ball, and it will create a more open game because you'll have to get out of trouble, and if you do, there'll be space to go and score down the other end, you know. So I just think we have to wait in some ways, you know.
It's the theme of the season. Just wait. It's going to get better. It's going to get so good.
Waiting for Goddo Football Championship.
Can I blitz through a few very quick emails? Hi all, I look forward to a slight tangent every week. The best segment of radio there is, says Nick. What's been bugging me for a while is the overuse of certain flavour of the month phrases from pundits, commentators, journalists and coaches. A few years ago I found myself coaching a local soccer team, and I kept catching myself using the term pockets of space when players weren't getting the ball. I mostly used this when trying to fill time until I found something better to say. Nowadays you can't listen to a segment without the middle third in GAA, and plays on the half turn in soccer dropped in. The middle third is the one that annoys me the most. He mentions a previous hurling coach who said it every training session. It screamed to me as someone who didn't want to actually think of a plan for himself. What are some of your overused phrases?
It's an angry man.
Yes, that are overutilized by coaches, says Nick.
Philosophy.
The one that jumped out to me, philosophy for sure. The one that jumped out to me by a mile across soccer and GAA now is transition.
Yeah.
Like, you can't go to the toilet without the transition being part of it somehow. There's a transition just in everything. It's overused for sure.
Yeah, I don't have anything, I have to say.
Corridor of uncertainty seemed to be really in vogue for a little while.
I don't know if coaches are talking too much about the corridor.
Matt Williams loves the
It's
corridor.
more of a pundit thing.
A pundit cliche, maybe.
Yeah.
They're phrases I associate with trying to break.
What about things like controlling the controllables and things like that?
Stop. Yeah.
What's the other one? What's the big rugby one? IP? Is that it? To talk about that? Is it? I forget what it is.
Rugby is the chief offending sport.
Rugby is work-ons.
Wow.
Work-on.
Learnings are good.
Something that seems to be creeping in at the moment, Joe, is people talking about players' USP, their unique selling point, as if they're a business or something.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I know, it would leave you cold.
What you need to say to lads is just go out there, lads. Get stuck in.
Just enjoy it.
Enjoy yourself.
Being an individual out there.
Kick the points from under the stand.
Adam in Dublin. I'm going to get to one text on Harry Kane in just a moment. Adam in Dublin briefly says, long time, third time. Oof.
He left two of his other emails in the scrap heap.
In the scrap heap.
Or we just don't remember them.
Love the chat with Dan McDonald on Wednesday's football show, but my interest peaked massively when you spoke about illegal streaming. I'm a sports obsessed man in his early 30s, and I don't know, and I genuinely mean this, he says in brackets, any single one of my friends, and then in brackets again, or even colleagues or acquaintances below the age of 40 who has a legitimate and traditional sports or TV package bundle, i.e. Sky, Virgin, BT, etc. And he talks about when you have Netflix and Spotify and Disney, you can get in and out of the bundle with a very small commitment. The thought of a minimum 12-month contract for sport is so alien to myself and all around me. And so he wonders if we're heading towards a kind of a breakaway system where matches are subscribed to per month across devices. Thoughts, Adam Dublin? Well, to be fair, like the Now TV thing is very much heading down that route where if you want, you can just pay for it for a day. You can get Sky or BT for a day.
I think you do the weekend Sky thing as well.
Yeah, or like when a major's on, they'll do, Now TV for the week, so you get the major. So I presume, like before AI ruins the world, and that's all I wanted to talk to you guys about.
Next week, Joe.
Honest to God,
if they let us.
There's a podcast I heard. I like it should come with a health warning. It's that terrifying. But before all that happens, I presume we'll just get to a point very quickly where there will just be something that houses everything, and you pay per event. Like the business of Sky, BT, X, it's just
in fairness, like you don't have to pay a 12-month contract for sport.
No.
Like I mean that's important. But what you do probably have to have in what he's saying is a 12-month contract with Sky or with Virgin in the first place to have the TV package. So that's probably what he means. And it does feel like we're probably heading toward. We're definitely the latter end of that. You know.
What's an acceptable price for one match, be it Premier League or GA? What's GA go? Is it 12
per game? I think it depends on the game, doesn't it? We're talking around 12, yeah.
Okay.
80 for the year.
You could probably, I think you can get like a Now TV Sky Sports thing for like a tenner for the day.
Yeah, it used to be anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
You used to be able to get 15 for a week.
What's fair for a one match?
God, I find it very reductive to be buying something for one match.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
A tenner seems fair.
I think a tenner on a one-off is just one thing you want.
If you're really owning it, doing it the odd time though.
Yeah.
Like otherwise, you're very quickly spending a lot of money if you just get it for one match. You're watching 4 games a weekend.
Well, you get it for the day, I guess.
Yeah.
Buy it for a whole
I think
day.
the subscription model is a bit away though, Joe, considering the TV rights are so crucial to so many sports and almost prop up the economy of some leagues and systems right now. I think as a result they're not going to go to the subscription model until it's worth more than what those rights would be, and if you're selling them for billions of pounds per year, it's probably a long way away. But I think the fighting of the streamers, as we talked about last week, it seems like peeing into the wind.
There's no reason though that in the next 5 years Sky Sports can't exist as a thing you get on its own rather than with a TV package in much the way like they obviously subcontract them now at the moment, so.
Hi lads, long time, first time. Harry Kane is a disgrace if he doesn't go to Real Madrid and stays in his comfortable world, winning nothing and trying to break individual records. Discuss. This is our final topic of the evening. Does going to Manchester United count as staying in his comfortable world and trying to win nothing? Because his choices, as in so much as I can see it, are United, Spurs, and then is the Real Madrid thing real? I guess Benzema's
he's
gone.
number 9 right now.
Yeah, apparently number 1 target of the summer.
I mean,
according to the
he would do great there. Yeah. So
Ancelotti has spoken about wanting to sign him as well. So
okay. What if Harry Kane stays at Spurs? Is that a disgrace? Coward. What's he afraid of?
Success.
Come on. What's he afraid of?
He's afraid of something. He's afraid of being outside of his comfort zone. Staying at a small club like Tottenham for his entire career.
To play for Ange Postecoglou.
Taking penalties at World Cups for England is outside his comfort zone, and he's done
They
it.
missed them.
Oh, jeez. I know, but he's not afraid of it. Like, he did it. I don't think he's in a comfort zone of like he tried to leave. Like, his brother and him signed a 6-year deal with like no buyout clause. If he's guilty of anything,
worst decisions in sport history.
I'm joking about the cowardice, obviously, but I think it's time. I think you have to challenge yourself at this stage of your career. I think you've got to that point now where you've one big move, and it's not to say that players should never stay. I just think Harry Kane's an exceptional player. He is like one of the best Premier League English players of all time, and he has a chance to go to Real Madrid and really make it. Like, I mean, he could do in 5 years at Real Madrid, leading the line.
Is it a better career if, say, he goes to Real Madrid and let's give him, he's there for 5 years, let's give him 3 La Liga and no Champions League? Just let's say there's a bit of a dip there. Or let's say he goes to Manchester United and overtakes Alan Shearer as the greatest goal scorer in the history of the Premier League, but at United he wins an FA Cup, because let's be honest, it's hard to see them winning a league title anytime soon in the next 5 years. Would you rather be Harry Kane, FA Cup, but above Alan Shearer, or would you rather be Harry Kane, not the all-time Premier League top goal scorer, and one of a gazillion people who's won like a cheap La Liga?
Yeah, do those records matter though?
Like
I mean, is he going to pass out Alan Shearer's actual record, which is goals in the league?
You know what I mean? Like, he'll pass Shearer if he stays.
Including his 2 Division 1 seasons, you know.
If he stays, he beats Shearer.
Yeah, okay, fine. And it's a great achievement. Him scoring 30 goals this season in a crap team is an amazing achievement. Like, I mean, he's...
But what's a better career?
I think being a successful number 9, the main guy at Real Madrid, is the best you could do. There was a time when Manchester United absolutely equalled that, but it's not now.
I don't know, you know.
I think I'd take 3 league titles over the record, but the record might mean more to Harry Kane than it would for us.
That's what I mean. I think the individual thing's a cop out, though. I do. I think you need to be you should be in football to, win.
Real Madrid would also.
How many goals you score doesn't matter in the end of the day. Like, if the other team scores more. You mention Alan Shearer's
record every second week. Can't turn on Match of the Day.
I can't think of enough quiz questions.
Madrid will give him the platform. Even I know you've had a hypothetical there where he wins no Champions League.
Yeah, no, I did. Real Madrid, the argument.
He also has more of a chance of winning the Champions League.
Madrid will give him a platform to be competing consistently for the Champions League.
I'll give you that. I almost did that to say, like, there are no guarantees. So you say, he'll reign it with Real Madrid. It may not happen.
But do you not think, like, history looks back and goes, who was the top scorer? Oh, Harry Kane. He played with Spurs. They were contenders for the top 4. Versus that's Harry Kane. He was a Real Madrid player.
How many La Ligas has Gareth Bale won?
Gareth Bale won a load of La Ligas, but was he ever like the main man?
I don't think he won that many.
I think he probably only won one.
You know,
I think he's as many Champions Leagues as he'd have league titles.
I'd say he won only about 1 league. I'd say he won 1 league and they won about 3 Champions Leagues, 3 or 4. Was he there for the 5th? But they won very few leagues. I think they won one under Mourinho.
Is he 4 and 5, Joe?
But he was bombed out with
no, I don't.
stale tape.
No, I think he would have been around. So he left last year, so he wouldn't got La Liga.
Yeah,
they didn't win it this season.
But I'm just making the point. Like,
do you know what I mean?
Won 3 or 4 leagues, but he won 5 Champions.
Like
3 or 4,
being bombed out over like it's more important than like what he won there and stuff like that. Like, if that doesn't happen to Kane and he has the chance to go and be a Madrid,
what if he's gone to City?
Yeah. Like, why not? Like,
City was a no-brainer.
Stage.
City was a no-brainer because you win the Premier League and you get the record. I think the record, Shearer's record, that's a really big thing to give up.
I just think there's something. I think there's a flaw in some of the English players. I think you look at John Terry, Lampard, they're all about individual records and like who's lifting cups and like that's I think that's a flaw. And I think Kane is like the fact that he's openly talking about an individual record being more important than what he wins in his career.
He's not saying that.
It's openly true back channels.
You can't compare him to John Terry. John Terry in his full kit lifting the trophy. That's not what Kane. That's different.
And Frank Lampard winning a load of trophies can't be construed
serial winner. Frank Lampard.
He was asking JT could he hold one of the arms. How
many leagues did Frank Lampard win?
5, I think.
Must be a few, yeah.
See, no one knows, but you'd
maybe
know
6.
You'd know if he'd scored 261 Premier League goals.
I would know that.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that would define his career more than a few league titles.
It is the thing that crops up for
hundreds of people have won league titles,
isn't it? Every time.
Yeah.
Beyond even the league win.
Hundreds of people have won league titles.
Yeah.
Only one person gets to beat Alan Shearer's record.
Yeah, it is alluring now that you say it.
But it's a team game.
It's a team game. Grow up.
Go on, you have to go.
All right, we're out of time. That was a slight tangent. Will, thank you very much.
Cheers.
Michael, thank you.
Whatever.
And Arthur O'D, pleasure.
Cheers, Joe.